Well, good day, viewers. Today we have a 2009 Tundra, and it's had a history of intermittently not cranking. Customers been fighting with this for over a year, and it's gotten predominantly worse in the last few weeks. Now, we've got several keys here. I'm going to use the key that he uses most of the time, and I'm going to try and start it. Did you hear the click from the starter? That time it started. I tried this earlier and the starter would just click like the solenoid was engaging, but the motor contacts in the solenoid not making a connection. So I'm pretty confident this thing needs a starter. I actually would have to put a test light on the S terminal at the starter motor to qualify it, but given the symptom, when I'm hearing a click from the starter and no response from the starter, there. Wish I could turn this heater off. There's another click. Yeah, I'm gonna order a starter for this thing. I'm pretty confident that's what it is. So I believe this purple relay is the starter relay because it's labeled ST on here. So I'm going to take this relay out, and I have a relay jumper here that when I plug in will complete the circuit, and it should crank the engine over. We're going to see if, and this would bypass the ignition switch. So it blew my 15 amp fuse. I'm going to get another fuse for this. To replace the fuse in here, we're going to try this again. You can hear the solenoid clicking. So the solenoid is the problem on the starter, but we're going to change the entire starter. So let's put this back in, and hopefully it'll start so we can bring it in the shop. Let's see. So we're underneath the truck, looking up behind the right exhaust manifold, and right in there is the starter. Lovely. Toyota's so proud of this starter, they built a truck right around it. According to the service literature, you're supposed to remove the right exhaust manifold to do this, but I've seen multiple videos showing access to the starter without taking the manifold off, although it's not pleasant. It mentions disconnecting and removing the dipstick tube, moving these cooler lines out of the way. This is one starter bolt here, and the other one is up higher, kind of behind these bolts. And the starter will weasel out through here barely, apparently. So I think we'll take the inner fender skirt off so we can see in there a little better. This shield has to come off. This shield has to come off. Yeah, let's get started. I've got the battery negative post disconnected already. So I got the right front wheel off, and this inner fender liner clips out of here, just drop down. So we have to take this shield off the manifold. These bolts are originally 10 mil, but they're rusted now to fit, so a 9 mil almost fits. And I think there's one up in this area here. That's going to be a challenge. But yeah, I'm using one of these reverse spiral easy outs, the 3/8 one, because 10 mil socket just spins on there now. So there's 3 bolts that hold this heat shield onto the exhaust manifold, one up here, so you have to access it through this hole, unclip the wiring harness from this bracket, unplug the power steering pressure sensor or power steering pressure switch, And now we got the bolt out, and that bolt was a pain in the ass. I might have to take the dipstick out, but I'm hoping that I can flex this enough to get the shield out. Move this harness out of the way, maybe take this bracket off the frame, but we'll see. So I managed to pull that shield out through the body here. It is kind of flexible, so you can kind of bend it a little bit. And as I said, there's 3 bolts that hold it on. We're going to replace those 3 bolts. Now you can see access to the inner shield, that one there, and there's 3 bolts on it, 2 at the bottom, and 1, you can see the boss on the starter right up there. That one's going to be a challenge, but hopefully we can bend this in slightly because it is flexible, and access that, and hopefully these bolts aren't as rusty as the other ones. The other 3 I had to use reverse easy outs to get these bolts out because they're not 10mm anymore. They're eaten away by the salt. So I got 2 of those shield bolts out from the bottom, and the top one loosened. I bent the shield inward so that I could get a box end wrench. And I can't get my fingers up there. I'm going to hope that I can drop the starter. So I'm going to remove this bolt here on this bracket so I can move these pipes inboard to get that upper bolt up there. Right up there. I think the bracket bolt is 12mm. So you can see that one bolt way up here. I didn't get it with a socket like the lower one with a flex socket. I got it with a combination, a double offset wrench, and then a ratcheting box end. And these pipes don't move very far. They do move a little bit, but not very far. So you don't have much room in here to get your hands in here. And that bolt is, you know, just a little bit too tight to turn with the fingers, with 2 fingers like this, and too loose to turn with a ratcheting box end. Well, that shield over top of the starter is a bitch. It wraps over top of the starter and around the front of the starter, and you have to kind of straighten it out to wiggle and pull it out of there. That upper starter bolt is a bitch. I managed to get it with a 1/4 inch drive flex socket, but it's still not completely out. There's the starter. Hopefully it's going to come out through this hole here. I'm still trying to get that upper starter bolt out. I got the flex socket on there, but it's a 1/4 inch drive 14mm, but it's pointed up. Well, that was fun. I got it out that far. I'm going to try undoing the right motor mount and raising the engine slightly, see if that'll help, because I don't really want to disturb this exhaust. And this transcooler here, I don't think is going to come off that conveniently. It's got to go up quite a bit to get out of there. It won't come out through the wheel well because the exhaust manifold's in the way. It won't come out the front. It's either that or take the exhaust pipe off. And that's not pleasant, but we may end up doing that. You know what, maybe that's what we'll do. We'll drop the exhaust pipe, push the starter back up in there, take those flange bolts out, take this flange apart, and take this pipe out of here. So there's the exhaust pipe off. One of the bolts broke, but I think there's about a 1/4 inch of bolt, so I think we're okay. Don't need to change that, but if I have to, I will. And we'll get a new gasket for that. That makes it a little bit easier to reach in there anyways with that pipe out of the way. This end here, need a new gasket as well. I had to cut the bolts off because they're compromised. So let's see what kind of gasket. So they're 2 rings. Okay, I'll get those gaskets for tomorrow. Here is a pesky starter. It is original. Never been apart before. So this is the starter we're putting into it, and that's the part number. It has a lifetime warranty because it's not a commercial application. This upper bolt's going to be a challenge. I was thinking of putting a stud in there and then a nut afterwards on that shield, because that shield bolts on here. I was also contemplating the idea of drilling an access hole through that shield, but maybe at the very back there, drilling an access hole through where I could stick one finger in there. I'm going to think about this. So I took that inner shield out. There's a bolt from inside and this one bolt here, and I cut about 3/4 of an inch off the end of it so I can get my finger through here to access that top bolt on the heat shield on the starter, because I was able to get it out, but chances of it going back in from underneath, especially after I have to mangle that shield to get it in there, are slim. So I'm hoping that gives me enough clearance. I put new bolts in there. So there's the starter bolted back in there. If you take this bracket bolt out, you can move these pipes over towards the manifold 1/2 inch, and that gives you room to get a 1/4 inch drive flex socket like this. 14 mil on that upper bolt is still a challenge. When you're sliding the starter in, slide it up with the nose or the tail end of the starter up into the exhaust manifold, behind the exhaust manifold there. It barely goes in there, but it does go in, obviously. So now we'll get the wires hooked up and get that shield back in. So I'm reinstalling the control wire, which is a molded connector, and this is what happens. It's brittle. It just crumbled when I squeezed it. I squeezed it to push it on there and it just broke into pieces. So now it's not like you can just put a spade terminal in there and expect it to stay secure. It's got to be locked in. The pigtail is available, but it's 3 to 4 days away, and it's the weekend tomorrow, so that means 5 days probably, unless I can find one locally. But I tried all the local parts stores and nobody's got it. They got a part number. So there's the pigtail for the starter control wire from Napa, but they have no stock and nowhere in anywhere close by. I tried Part Source, I tried Fat Guys, I tried Auto Parts Central. I suppose I could try a salvage yard tomorrow and see if they have a connector that'll plug into that solenoid. Because of its location buried behind the manifold like that, I don't want to take a chance on jimmy rigging something up. This is bad enough. So I managed to find a used connector off of a RAV4. Toyota uses this same connector on a lot of their vehicles. So this one's in good shape, came out. So I'm going to splice this in and continue the reassembly saga here. So there's the wire spliced together with a uninsulated butt plate, soldered and heat shrunk. So we can plug this in and reattach the battery cable. So there's the starter reconnected electrically. I'm going to let it down and put the battery cable on temporarily and try it. So I'm going to install this relay bypass. So I'm pretty sure it's going to work when we finish putting it back together again. Let's take the battery cable off while we're putting that heat shield in. Tuck it down out of the way so that it doesn't ground out. So as you can see, I ended up taking that inner exhaust manifold shield out. There's one bolt up there and one bolt from the back side here. What I'm going to do is drill this nut through so that I can put a bolt from this side and a nut on the other side. It's easier to hold a nut than it is to try to thread once again. I'm going to put the shield onto the starter first, this one here. It goes. this way towards the front. This is the front. So getting that upper bolt through here is a pain. I managed to reach down with one finger on top of the manifold and one finger through here to start the bolt after I put the two bottom bolts in and made sure the hole was lined up. So now I'll try to get this inner shield in here. Hopefully it'll go in, and bend this back around. Hopefully that goes in. I think I might drill this hole out so that I can put a bolt through and a nut from the inside, because it's easy to reach up here and slide a nut in. We'll see. Well, I'm not going to lie, that was fun. So I got that inner shield in, drilled this boss out so that I could put the bolt in from this side and a nut back here, because it's much easier to fish a nut up there than it is to, you can't get fingers up there to turn the bolt in from the back side, so tighten it from this side with a nut on the back. Now we'll put the outer shield, actually the dipstick tube. I had removed the dipstick tube earlier, so we got to put the dipstick tube back in. So there's the heat shield reinstalled. Actually put the dipstick tube in after the fact because there's one bolt in the front that's a little easier to get if the dipstick's not in the way. And change the seal on the bottom of the dipstick. There's a small bolt up there that holds the dipstick tube to the cylinder head. And reconnect these power steering pressure switch. Snap and re-secure this harness. The clip is busted here, so I'll put a tie wrap around it to hold it there. Yeah, so far so good. Next to put the exhaust back on. Well, the moment of truth. We'll see if this thing will start. Well, that sounds good. Let's throw the scanner on this. I got one more thing I want to show you guys. So I'm going to do a code scan of all the controllers. And I know I've had the battery disconnected, so it would have cleared any codes. Now this thing has had this history of a no crank condition, and we were chasing a security problem because it would come in every time it came in. It had a history code for security. And of course there's nothing now because it's been cleared because of the battery being disconnected. So we'll go through this network scan and see if there's any codes. Okay, so there's 12 controllers or 11 controllers and no codes in anything. But I'll show you the history on this thing. So when it was in last time and he complained about it intermittently not cranking, this is today's scan, 8/01/23, no codes present. So back in August the 1st of 23, when I never experienced the no crank condition, it had a B2799 engine immobilizer system. B2799 in the ECM for engine immobilizer system. So you would obviously put two and two together and assume that there's something wrong with the security system or a key, and that's why we were trying different keys. But I'm wondering if it's aftermarket car starter that's causing the security code. So I'm going to purposely start the vehicle with the car starter and see if it generates a code. I'm going to go into engine here and see if there's any codes. Current, no codes. History, no codes. And pending, no codes. So I'm going to shut the hood and start the vehicle with the car starter. So I use this remote to start the vehicle now. And the vehicle is running, parking lights are on, doors are locked. Let's see if there's any codes. No codes present. Pending codes. No codes present. Well, let's put the key in the door and open it or unlock it. Let's see, unlock it with the remote. So I unlocked the doors electrically, and I put the key in the ignition and turned it on. Let's see if there's any codes. No codes. About pending. No code. So I don't know what's generating that random security code 2799, but we're gonna let it go now with a clear slate and see what happens. That's it for now. That was fun. Thanks for watching.